This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Detroit is the greatest!
Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back with Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! A magnificent goal! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am Jason Jarvie. Follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. And it always, the name on the front of the jersey matters a whole hell of a lot more than the name on the back of the jersey. So, also with me, I had to say that because it's the Olympics. The Olympics are here. We had the gigantic, crazy opening on Friday. But with me, as always, is the doc, John Macaroon. How's it going, bud?
It's going great, man. I had a great weekend, relaxed. Now I'm ready to kick off another great week of podcasting on the DSP network. Great to see you as always. You're very patient then. You basically sat through 3.5, 4 hours of people walking, holding a flag.
It was a little crazy. I watched it with my wife, and I've never actually sat through a full opening. I watched a little bit of the London opening, but it was trippy. I imagine if we partaked in, or if we partook in some drugs, it would look pretty trippy. It started out, it literally spanned the entire beginning of Brazil, and they used the projection on the floor to make it look like the rainforest, which I didn't really connect that. But then they did this whole thing with they made the floor buildings, and then they had people do parkour over it, which that was really cool. And I admit it probably took a lot to choreograph something like that. It started to lose me when Giselle came out, and it was her send-off of the runway, and she literally just walked across the whole stadium. And I'm like, is she going to do anything? And all she's doing is walking. But I guess that's her job. And yeah, once we got to all the teams coming in, we waited for the U.S. to get, which we didn't have to wait too long, because apparently they went by the Portuguese language, and we ended up in the E's. So we got to see all the United States Olympians walk across. We saw Michael Phelps wave that flag. I'm not sure if he might have been high out of his mind. I read something that Olympians can actually smoke weed now.
Really?
Yeah, that they just they can't smoke it on the day that they're competing. Which if that is true, that's a huge breakthrough. But one thing that does, I'm not sure why they do it, but they don't have all the athletes walk across the stage. Like the women's gymnastics team, they didn't get to walk in that opening. And I mean, if for those kinds of girls, because they may only get this one shot to be in the Olympics, I would think that they would want to be a part of something like that.
See, Jason, I'm mad at myself because I'm just not into the Olympics. I caught the very end where they lit the cauldron. It was very nice, a great spectacle, the fireworks going all around the stadium. But then the next day you read and you see how the journalists are kind of presenting it. You see kind of the poorer cities right across, and you could kind of maybe pay a little bit to kind of watch from afar. The journalists that have reported on the corruption, on how the Olympic IOC committee has kind of basically used the Olympics as a way to line their pockets, to ask for a lot of privileges. I watched the HBO Real Sports hour-and-a-half special that laid out some of the major concerns that are out there, and it's kind of tainted the whole Olympic experience for me. It's just like, you know what? How do you spend all that money, put up these beautiful, stadiums and things like that, have these great festivals, and then within 10 miles, you have the poorest cities in Rio? It's so sad. It's just like, you know what? It's important. The Olympics are important. I get it. But I just can't outweigh the value of the Olympics versus poor cities, gangs, violence. The president, I believe, is being impeached because of some serious violations. And so
And this is 2 years in a row now for Brazil with the Olympics right on top of the World Cup.
Exactly. And so for me, it's just kind of, it's not must watch right now. I understand there's a lot of storylines. I did like the feature on Michael Phelps talking about his past, how he got the DUIs and how he got to a low point when he thought his swimming career was over. Those are the stories that are great, which you can check out online. But sitting watching the live events, for me at this point in time, I'm busy. I don't have time to watch. I'm kind of basically watching from afar, where I'm reading the results, I'm checking out the headlines, any news or tidbits that's coming out on radio. That's about it for me in the Olympics. I don't know what's must see or what's upcoming. I know the gymnastics is going on. What else?
For
is
me,
up?
it's I'm not sitting at home with the live stream watching the air rifle. I know that was the first gold of the Olympic Games, but I'm tuning in. You can say whatever you want. The women's gymnastics team is amazing because they are head and shoulders just better than everybody else. We were watching it when it happened, I think on Sunday, when they had the preliminaries, and it was scoring to rank them for the all around individual and then the team event. And the USA finished with the top 3 in the event. And I read something that the score that they got, they finished 10 points better than the next team, which in recent years, you're talking about your fractions, separating first, second, and third. So to be 10 points better, and then also if they were to take the lowest scores on their teams and use those, they would still be 6 points higher than everybody. So
then U.S. gymnastics team is slated to win gold, a lot of gold in gymnastics this year.
U.S. women's gymnastics team really is. They should their top 2, because you can only send 2, unfortunately, to the all-around individual event. So they should get gold and silver, or at least they should get 2 medals out of that. And then they're heavy favorites to win the team event. I think when you go into the individual events, you're probably gonna. I'm not saying that they're gonna sweep gold, but I think you're gonna see probably everybody at least win a medal there. So that's a really great storyline because of how good they are. And then you look at both basketball teams. I think the women's basketball team, they set a bunch of records against Senegal, and I get they're playing against Senegal. And then I tuned into like a quarter of the U.S. versus Venezuela men's basketball, which the first quarter, the Venezuelans they slowed the game down and they were tied after the first quarter, but then the talent just kind of came through and U.S. ended up beating. I think basketball is kind of it's not it doesn't do it for me. Not in the Olympics.
No, exactly.
Because you have all those pros, and it's so overshadowed. Like, I think they should really do kind of what they have for soccer. And with soccer, it's under 23. You get to have 3 veteran players, but for the rest of the team, it's U23. So, I mean, yeah, of course you're going to win when you trot out a lineup of, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Paul George. You're literally playing with an NBA All-Star team, and you're going up against Venezuelans' best.
No, exactly. That's basically the consensus. You hit the nail right on the head with basketball. So the Olympics for me, not really drawing my interest, especially when you got the Tigers in a race trying to get back into the AL Central Division race. You got the Lions on Sunday going to kick off their preseason, I believe, and you got so many other stories going on. So the Olympics for me are just taking a back burner. But if you want to follow along, get a lot of hot takes, my boy at TV Chips on Twitter. He's watching all the events. He's tweeting all about it. So go follow him. Go if you want to talk about the Olympics. Message him and he'll give you some strong opinions and tell you what's been going on over there. But Monday evening, I get a chance to get home from a weekend trip to Chicago, unpack, get settled, and it's good because the Tigers are now out west. They're playing the Seattle Mariners, and they've been kind of up and down all year. They're a mess, but you going up against a pitcher that you had success in the past, and you go, okay, you're throwing out Fulmer, and it's going to be a good game. And I settle in. I haven't
lost a game with Fulmer since June.
Exactly. And I settle in, and I go, oh boy, it's going to be hard to kind of watch this because Dan Dickerson and Kirk Gibson were paired in the booth and on television. You know, what they're doing is for a handful of games, they're taking the radio guys, throwing them on TV, taking the TV guys, throwing them on the radio.
Right.
And the combination of Dan Dickerson and Gibby, they're very professional. But what you had was two stats guys just going back and forth, and it was a tough listen for me because within the first 3 innings, I'm like, I'm starting to yawn. I'm starting to fade. So I'm like, this is tough. They were so knowledgeable. Let me give them credit. They both knew, but it's just for the entertaining factor. It was really tough. I was really getting tired. But I sat through the whole game. It was something, enjoyable. It was an enjoyable game, but Fulmer gave up the couple runs in the second. Saltalamacchia said something interesting in that he felt like Fulmer was a little bit off. And Fulmer said, yeah, I missed, but I didn't miss to a point where it was causing devastation, which was awesome. And like, you know what? If a bad performance from Michael Fulmer is 100 pitches and you give up 2 runs, going strong, quality starts, this guy's got great potential. But the offense to show up.
If you plugged Fulmer into any of their starts or any of the games in the last 6 games, he probably would have won that game. And it wasn't on pitching last night. It was really on the offense that they didn't produce last night. I'm not sure if that's a sign of things to come or if it's just an off night. Maybe it's because they had to fly a couple thousand miles to Seattle, from after being at home for 9 straight days. And that's really the thing right now is that it's the offense. In their last 10 games, they've only lost 3, and in those 3 losses, they didn't score more than 3 points, three runs. And so they scored 3 and 1. They lost 6-3. And then they scored only 1 run and then 0 runs last night. And then in all their wins, I think, you're looking at 6 runs, 4 runs. They win a 2-1 outing against the White Sox, 11, 3, 14. It's the offense is what's doing it for us right now. We're getting some decent pitching from guys like Verlander and Fulmer. We're getting, good starts from the bottom of the rotation, and the bullpen has really been picking those guys up. Josh Wilson, Alex Wilson, Francisco Rodriguez. They've carried the team along.
Now you got to remember, earlier this year the Tigers had a series versus the Mariners, and they kind of roughed up Iwakuma. So he came back and made some adjustments. He went 7 innings strong, only gave up 5 hits, 1 walk, with 8 Ks, throwing 97 pitches. He had a solid performance, and what he was able to do was mix up his pitches, and he was getting outs. There were key fly ball outs, ground balls. He was mixing up his pitches, and he was just able to, I believe, you look at it and you go, you know what? The other team's getting paid too. You've seen a trend now in the Tigers in that their offense has kind of clicked. But you got to remember, there are pitchers out there getting paid, and they're studying, and they're trying to get guys out. And you got to remember, too, the Tigers are without maybe a key member of that offense, a key couple members. And you really got to start to look and go, you know what? Cameron Maybin is a guy that stirs the drink offensively. He gets hits. He's a contact hitter. He has power. And he's a guy that when he's inserted into the lineup, especially at home, is a guy that's very productive. And maybe when you take him out of the lineup, you start to see where it gets bogged down. And then you got the injury to Nick Castellanos is very devastating. It kind of is offset a little bit with the return of J.D. Martinez. But what's concerning is that, again, I'm starting to feel, and I hope I'm wrong, maybe we can get 2 out of 3 versus Seattle. I'm hoping that this isn't the beginning of the other side of the scale where, you win, 8 of 12, 8 of 10, and now you're going to have a week or 2 where you don't play well because upcoming you have a series versus Texas.
Yes, yeah, Texas is going to be. It's this next. I mean, I feel like we're in the situation where every week it's going to be what do the Tigers need to do to either still be in contention or to convince you that they've turned a corner and that they're actually going to try and make the playoffs. And it's the same this week, I think. And the biggest thing is going to be they need to win these series. And sweeping the Astros and the Red Sox was nice, but you don't need to sweep every single series. But you do need to win if you're going to make the playoffs. where the Tigers are at right now, you need to win these series, especially against a team like Texas. And then you get Boston again.
Well, when you look at the series shakeup, JV's going to take on King Felix on Wednesday. And
Is he? I thought I read that he misses Felix. I thought he has to take on Daniel Norris.
Nope, I believe that Daniel Norris is going to pitch Tuesday night. And this is going from Vito because we were prepping a little bit to talk some baseball. I believe the matchup...
Oh, yeah, that's what it says on... Sorry.
You're questioning Vito? I'm going to tell him.
I was looking on MLive, and I thought I read that Daniel Norris faces him.
So Jason Jarvie hates MLive and is calling him an organization that gives out misinformation.
That's not exact. That's not what I said at all.
No, I know. I'm just teasing you. But Vito broke it down for me because we're going to talk about it as well on his Tigers Talk podcast. But Daniel Norris comes back. We'll talk about that. JV's going to take on King Felix. And at first, you would say, well, King Felix might have an advantage. But JV has been must-see JV again, and his performances have been outstanding. So
King Felix hasn't been King Felix this year. He's had a stint on the DL.
Exactly.
After hurting himself on a home run celebration. So it's not the Hernandez versus Verlander that we've seen in years past. This is going to be, two guys who have been dinged up. But I think JV can come out on top of this.
Exactly. So Tuesday's game is very important in that we got to see what Daniel Norris brings to the table. We can talk about him for a few seconds.
Daniel Norris, undefeated. 1-0, baby.
Well, here's the thing. Daniel Norris, by all accounts, when you look at what he presents to the table, is a guy that's got good stuff. A left-handed pitcher that can dominate, that can be crafty as well. But the big thing is you can't be crafty, you can't be dominant, you can't be a reliable starter if you're injured often.
Often, and you can't be giving up earned runs.
And especially the injuries that he has. The oblique injury, you can't, that's the, when you're talking about, training for athletes, the core is important, essentially important for every single athlete. And when your core is not solid, you can't be an effective pitcher. And so he says he's been doing the Pilates, trying to do stretching in terms of trying to activate it and not hurt it too much. But it's going to be important to see. Is he going to be able to last 3-4 starts when you need him? Because if you're going to slot this is a guy that a lot of teams are asking for in trade situations, and you say, hey, no, this is my guy. We're going to keep him here. But if he's not going to be on the field, I know he's young, so we got time to be a little bit patient. But he's got to produce, and he's got to stay on the field.
I mean, isn't Daniel Norris, though, anything that we get out of him at this point, isn't it everything just gravy? This is a guy who, he was diagnosed with cancer. And, he's cancer-free now. I think anything we get out of him, especially because of how Fulmer has panned out. I think, going into last year with all those trades, I think Daniel Norris was the guy that we looked at as being the cream of the crop. And even after him, it was Matt Boyd. And because Michael Fulmer has panned out as much as he has, I think that kind of makes up for everything. I do think that Daniel Norris will be a successful pitcher, but if he can be your third, fourth guy in the rotation, that's all I really need out of him.
Right. And so here's the point of contention that maybe a lot of people have and are going to debate. Teams called around, and Al Avila was looking to improve this team. And they would call and ask for Fulmer. They would ask for Norris. They would ask for Boyd. And Al Avila took the stance of, no, those are our guys. We're going to keep them here. Right now, Boyd and Norris are looked at as potential in my eyes. And so if you could have gone out and gotten proven major league talent for this year, I might have been willing to trade Norris and Boyd. Okay, but no, now there's added pressure on them because the organization basically has said, no, we believe in you guys. We're going to have you in our organization and do the things here. Do I still have doubts about Norris and Boyd? Yeah, because Boyd's being used as a starter, and you might think that maybe he'll be transitioned to the bullpen. He might be a better suited as a long reliever. Because of his inconsistency, he can't go 6 strong, give you quality starts, start after start after start. And Norris is injury prone. So you could have maybe been wise, shipped him off, and maybe gotten proven talent back. Because you got to remember, if you just look back now with Dave Dombrowski and all the moves that he made for giving up potential and getting back guys, was there really a guy that's just been dominant that you go, oh my God, I cannot believe that we lost this guy?
I mean, really the only guy that I could think of would be Andrew Miller. And how long has it taken for him to pan out? And he's really only a closer.
Now, there are guys that are productive, but we're not talking about giving up a Miguel Cabrera. So you could have given up those 2 guys. So there's pressure on Norris, and I want to see what he does Tuesday in his start versus Seattle because he's not coming in a situation where there's no pressure. He's got to perform.
Yeah, definitely. And I would be curious to see what people were actually offering for Boyd and Norris. And I think I would like to think that if there was a good enough deal, that Avila would have pulled the trigger. But from what you're saying, it doesn't sound like we would have got something that would have really pushed us over the top. Because I think if the Tigers were going to make a deal at the trade deadline, it would have had to been something that made them that contender. And they probably looked at it and said, you know what? I think Norris and Boyd can do just as much as what we would get out of this major leaguer of whoever we'd get. So I do think Norris, he's going to turn it around. And I think Boyd's a little bit more of a question mark. I think at best he's a fifth starter. But I think you're right. I think he's better served. He should make that transition into a long reliever. Because if we had a solid long reliever, that would almost essentially round out the bullpen, because you'd have the long reliever, and then you can trot out Josh Wilson, Alex Wilson, Shane Green, and then K-Rod. We're essentially the Royals from last year. We're building it through our bullpen.
Well, we're talking about the bullpen. K-Rod has had a great season overall. But right now we're talking about his recent couple performances, and they haven't been too good, a little bit shaky. Are you a little bit concerned regarding how he's been performing? I see the problem is, though, Brett Ausmus and the way he uses him is unbelievable. You don't want to use him for a 4-out save when he has 7 days rest, but then when you notice that he's struggling, you put him in for 3 straight days. It doesn't make sense in terms of the way that Brett Ausmus has a feel for the use of K-Rod. When he's dominant and he's a guy that hasn't given up too many, blown save opportunities, he hasn't blown too many saves, then you don't use him. Then when you start seeing him struggle over this past weekend, you throw him in 3 straight days, and eventually it costs you a loss, over the weekend. You concerned at all, or he's going to get out of it?
I don't know. I think he's going to get out of it. I think looking at his, at when he's come in throughout the season, I just think Rodriguez is a guy who's going to get the job done. And I will stand by my position that, Ausmus this isn't Ausmus's doing. And I give him credit for keeping this team together. But this is, they're making this run sheerly on the talent that they have, and especially on the bats. But K-Rod, the guy he's a veteran. He's going to figure it out. And he hasn't been horrible. This last blown save, or this last, against the Mets where they lost 3-1, he gave up 2 earned runs.
But all weekend he looked a little shaky. He just didn't look like his old self.
He looked a little shaky, but he still got the job done. Mm-hmm. He still got 2 other saves. So I don't look into it too deeply. I think K-Rod's going to be okay. Maybe it's a resurgence of the Zika virus that he used to have, but he's going to be good.
Okay, so now an interesting scenario took place, and so I told you that I was on a trip to Chicago. So, it's about a 4 to 5 hour drive. When you have kids, it makes it into a 6-hour drive because you got to take potty breaks and you got to eat and stuff like that. So, of course, my little 6-year-old nephew chimes in and is like, "Nick Castellanos is hurt, Uncle?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he's hurt. He got hit in the hand." And at first he wanted details about, like, was it scratched or bleeding, like the minor details of how a broken hand works. So then he goes, okay. He's pondering, and he goes, well, why don't we stick Miguel Cabrera at third and have Sal Talamacchia play first every day? And I said, well, I can't really argue with that, but other than that, Miguel hasn't done it. And so then, I talked to him a little bit, and he kind of was talking about his, he likes Tyler Collins coming back and the power and, the minutia of, the guys that are playing well right now. But it got me to thinking, okay, who's the guy now that's replacing Castellanos? And it's a guy, a veteran, a 33-year-old Casey McGahee. And in the minors, he was batting very well at AAA, batting above 300. He was batting 325 in 108 games with Toledo. So he comes up, and he's a guy now that's going to be pegged to try to replace Castellanos. You comfortable with that? I mean, this is a guy that has a little bit of pop, is a veteran. Do you think it's a better option than what my little 6-year-old nephew presented? If hey, Sal Talamacchia, if you give him maybe, I know that right now he's getting spot started in place of James McCann. He's got pop, but when you look at his numbers, they're not the best. He's good in the situation that he's in right now. I'm not sure exactly that he'll be great if he's an everyday player, but it's an interesting option.
I don't think it's there's really a no-lose situation. Bringing up McGahee and to see what he can do. I'm not opposed to putting Cabrera at third, having Saltalamacchia at first. I do think, if Miggy's at third,
injuries.
That's the
Tough
biggest
position
thing.
at his age, right?
It's a very hard position to play, and you saw that when Fielder was here and he had to play third. Then it's gonna take time, and I think bringing up this veteran, it doesn't hurt to see what he can do. If he does bomb, then you can go with either Romine or Avilas at third, or put Miggy at third just to see what happens.
Or the craziest option of them all, one that people have speculated about, but I think all the fans tweeted us capital N, capital O. Maybe you sell some tickets. Maybe you hype up a guy that was recently announced to be retired, a person that has a polarizing force, somebody that was an opposition for a long time. Do you think maybe they looked at or thought about bringing Alex Rodriguez to the Detroit Tigers, slot him in at third base, and hell, if he's going to bat 200, whatever, if he gets 4 home runs, it'll be maybe at Comerica Park in front of 40,000 people. 700 home runs. Would you want to see that at Comerica if he hits 700?
If it didn't completely balloon our salary cap, then I'd be fine with it.
What number do you think the Yankees would have to pay of that salary? He's going to get that money. The Yankees have said, listen, whatever behind the scenes was going on, whether he was hated or pushed out, they said, hey, we're going to pay him all his money that he's due, and you're going to be a special advisor to the team. You're going to play your last game Friday, August 12th, and there you go. Or do you say, hey, pay 17, 18 million of it, we'll take 10, and we'll see what happens?
I think it's way more. I think
more than that?
I mean, for me, it would have to be 80 to 90%. Because I don't want any of that. If I would want it to truly be, hey, see what happens, and if it works out, it's good for us. Because the Yankees truly are in sell mode. They sold off almost all of their good assets. So this would have been just their last thing. And if they're going to pay the money anyways, so have him be a special advisor, then hey, we'll take 10 to 20% of that salary, and then we'll give him a try. I think Miguel Cabrera actually has a better range than A-Rod at this point, though. Who knows? The guy might just get injured too. I think that's one of the reasons that they haven't played him.
Okay, for those who don't know, he signed a 10-year, $275 million salary, and what's going on now? He's took a lot of money up front. And so what's going down now is in 2017, he'd be owed a base salary of $20 million with a $1 million signing bonus. So $21 million. You want the Yankees to take on $18 million of that, basically.
Yep.
And basically you would be comfortable if the Tigers paid $2 to $3 million of his salary.
Yep. The guy isn't. It's not the Alex Rodriguez who's going out there starting every day. This is a guy who he can give you spot starts at this point.
So then,
be a pinch hitter.
Is he more valuable to the Yankees then as an advisor or as a guy that you just ship off and pay 18 and save $3 million?
I mean, I think he's probably. I think if they could have sold him off, they would have. But I just don't. I don't think anybody. I think a lot of the people are probably think like me. They don't want to pay that money. That's probably even more than he should be making at this point. $3 million. The fact that he's getting $20 million, it blows my mind. The guy.
Well, get ready, Verlander, Cabrera. At some point, you're going to see that where the last year or two of their deals, you're going to be like, seriously, we're paying Verlander and Cabrera for these numbers? But you have to do it. You have to do it.
It does actually. If A-Rod can actually transition into this type of a role of being an advisor, I think it will be beneficial to the Yankees. They got a ton of prospects. A-Rod could, unless he's telling those guys to go out and dope up, he's going to be a pretty good mentor to these players who are going to be coming up to the system.
See, and you got to remember, I know everybody lives in a here and now society. Right now, what's going on? Is he worth it now? He's not worth it now. But you got to remember, 2009, when you were dancing, celebrating, winning the World Series, who was a big part of it? Jeter, A-Rod, he was a part of the team, and they won a World Series. So if you're a fan, would you take that? Would you take paying A-Rod as a Tiger this year if they would have won the World Series in 2009? You all would say yes. I would take it. I would have paid $300 million. $400, it's not my money. I would have paid $350. If it would have got us one ring and they could afford it, this is what you do. And so the Yankees have the means. They don't want to pay it. It's an irritant, but they'll be okay. But so you vote no on seeing the spectacle more than the performance. I'd like to see it. 700 home runs. It would be something that.
How much would you pay him though?
Yeah, see, that's a good question. Probably between 3 and 5. You have a good point.
Yeah, and I don't think the
Yankees will do that.
No,
and so
they would rather just have him sit in their clubhouse, and he's a name that they can trot out.
I think the first offer they make
it's literally like a league of their own, where they hire the manager just to come out, wave his hat, and then go sit on the bench.
Yeah, the first offer they probably throw is half. We'll pay half of it, and they go from there. But no, I think the fans here in Detroit don't want to see him. I think he's past his prime, batting around 200, and he's been a guy for the last couple of years, an individual that's been polarizing for the Yankees. So he's not going to help us. We're not going to see number 700 here in Detroit. Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Another guy that the Tigers are considering, I still write him off, but Anibal Sanchez, he's had 2 decent outings in his last 2 starts. He lost, obviously, the game against the Mets, but he went 8 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run with 10 strikeouts. And then the game before, it was a win. He went 6 innings, only, again, 6 hits, only 1 earned run, only 2 strikeouts. Do you see anything? Are you reading anything more into this, that this might be a resurgence for Anibal, or is this kind of just a product of being in a team that's on a really, really good hot streak?
No, the offense helped him. I like Anibal Sanchez in a role that he's not in right now. He's not a starter. You can't, right now, based on what he's shown, you can't count on him. You can say, yeah, he's going to have some quality starts. He is a major league talent. You're going to go out there and at least once in a while stumble into a quality start, and pitch well. But what happens is consistently, when you look at a longer body of work, this is a guy that can't go 100 pitches. Around 5-6 innings, he gets worn down and his stuff becomes hittable. He's not reliable. And so his usage is exactly slotted for a long reliever. You need 2 or 3 innings, 4 innings max. Then this is a guy that you slot in there and you say, hey, go do your job. He belongs in the bullpen. And so every start that he gets out there, unfortunately, they're relying upon him. But if you're relying upon Anibal Sanchez right now, in my opinion, it's going to be something that's going to be a roller coaster at best.
Yeah, and you look at the stats. All you have to do is look at his game log to really point at it's an anomaly. He's not going to keep this up, because this is the first time. These are the first 2 games this season that he's pitched over 6 innings, and he's only had 1 earned run. And really looking at the rest of his stats, he's only had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other outings where he's had only 1 or less earned run. And in a lot of those, he's only pitching 2 innings. That's when he was pitching as a reliever. And that really should be where Anibal Sanchez is. He is so much better slotted as a reliever, because we've seen it, that he can go through the lineup once, maybe twice, and get guys out. But he can't go 4 or 5 innings, because that's when it starts to click, and then the wheels start to fall off. So the Tigers are going to have to be very careful with Anibal Sanchez right now.
Upcoming, you got a series versus the Texas Rangers. You got to finish the series out versus the Mariners. So the Tigers have a strong week ahead. Right now, as we sit, 10 games over 500, 2.5 back of the Indians. And I know that you're looking at them and you're like, oh, baby, there's a chance I'm getting some Qdoba for free.
I'm totally getting some Qdoba for free. Yeah, they're 2.5 back from the Indians, and they currently sit tied for the second wild card spot. So it's looking very likely that the Tigers, if like the season were to end in the next week, the Tigers are going to have a pretty decent shot of making the postseason. In the Indians, they're 5-5 in their last 10. I started to say that the Indians were starting to go Indians. I'm not. I retract that slightly, because I think Danny Salazar was getting injured is one thing, but I think you're going to need another couple weeks of them really struggling to really start to see them slide. And they have a pretty decent schedule coming up. They we may see them lose their next 2 games. They're going up against the Nationals with Scherzer and Gio Gonzalez, but then they get the Angels and the White Sox. I think probably closer to the end of August, you might see them start to struggle. They play in some harder teams. But I really think every week it's going to go back and back, and it's going to come down to probably the last weekend in September.
So before we get to Lions talk in the second half of the podcast, got a couple questions, quick hitter style, yes or no. 1 game playoff, if that's what they earn. Fulmer, JV, not taking rest into account. Who do you feel more confident in a 1-game playoff? Fulmer, JV, right
JV.
now? Okay.
JV all the way. I mean, as good as Fulmer has been, I still would give that to JV. I think he gives you the best opportunity to win 1 game.
Okay. Did the Tigers botch the Jordan Zimmerman injury and bringing him back and keeping him in that game that he returned and performed terribly?
I have to say yes, because they should have kind of, I mean, unless he truly went out there and hurt himself, pitching just in that game, they had to at least notice that there was some tightness and that he really truly wasn't ready to be back. So I kind of have to say that they botched that.
Fulmer should be on a pitch count. Right now, looking around to be 185. If they make the postseason, he may slot around 200 innings. JV, as a rookie back in 2006, got in around 185 innings. They're watching it. They're looking at it as a way to kind of evolve his arm, because you don't want to really overuse a guy and have him increase his workload that much. It's a science, but should Fulmer be on a cap? Or let it ride, baby?
I think it really depends on where they are in September, and if they are making the postseason. I think you have to let him go the rest of the season. I don't think you shut him down before the season ends, and that may be a cop-out, but I think if you have a chance to win a World Series, or if you're at least in a position to, win a wild card game or be in a series, I think you need to put out Fulmer. So I say no to an innings cap.
Great Tigers talk. I can't wait to.
What do you think? Do you think there should be an innings cap?
Yeah, you have to nowadays with the science in terms of the just by looking at it. Ideally, you can say, "Oh yeah, these guys are old school," and let them just go. But the rash of Tommy John surgeries in recent years has just made it so that you have to look at it as a science and protect these guys' arms. Hey, back in the day, you're committing $30,000 to someone. Okay, no problem. Now you're committing $30 million potentially to Fulmer in the future. You can't risk that investment. No money involved. Throw until your arm falls off.
So you said 185, 200 as his inning cap. I'm not sure if he's going to reach that. Right now
because they're limiting it. Yeah, because
right now he's at 111.
Yep.
I'm not even sure if he gets up to that 185 by the end of the season.
Right. That's why it's good. They're monitoring it, and they've got him out, after 6-7 innings a lot of times. And so
it definitely helps our bullpen is pitching the way that they are. One last question before we end this Tigers topic. Where do you think our outfield depth is right now?
Ooh,
how are you feeling on our outfield?
I'm feeling okay. Tyler Collins has been okay. JD's okay. But again, the guy that I look to, and it was a great moment too, during Monday's game. Dan Dickerson goes over to Kirk Gibson and he goes, "Hey, back in Arizona when you were the manager, when did you start knowing that Justin Upton was going to get hot?" And there's been a little bit of stories being told that when he was there, basically they weren't really getting along all that great, and was one of the reasons and a catalyst as to why Upton was no longer there. But Gibson gave a professional answer, but then again, he had to say that right now here in Detroit, Justin Upton just isn't getting into rhythm enough. He just isn't producing enough. Yeah, and I say it, if that guy can get heated up and can do something, smash the hell out of the baseball, this is a guy that's drawing a lot of money and it's underperforming. If that guy could step it up, this offense could keep rolling and you can have even more success. So if right now they're doing a great job of masking him, but if he could just step it up, if we could find Justin Upton's old bat, and he's turned it around, but it's not to where he needs to be consistently enough. If he could just turn it around, we'd be so much farther ahead than where we are right now.
Now, I'm looking at depth for the outfield.
If something happens, we're in trouble.
Here's what
Big time trouble.
What do you think about the Tigers taking a look at Tim Tebow?
Oh, you're reading my mind. I was going to write that as the fourth question. 29 years old. It's an attraction. Listen.
He's a college football analyst right now. He's not too far removed from the NFL. and he's been working out for over 2 years now to try and get ready to impress the baseball scouts to show that he can still play baseball.
You know what happened? I'm going to bring up a name because I stayed up late on Monday evening, and after the Tigers game, after the Tigers live show, they did a Tigers special where they talked about the unsung heroes of the 2006 team, and they brought up some of the guys that were lesser known than the JVs and the Carlos Guillans and things like that. They brought up a name. I've never heard of him before because his stint was so fast. You know who Tim Tebow probably would equate to? A guy like a Cleveland. That was his name. And what he was he came up in 2006 for a stint, maybe half the year. And he came out for his first couple games, and he had a great debut, couple home runs, and he brought some intangibles, but he couldn't sustain it. And he was a flash in the pan, as you would say. So he came up. If you look it up, his it's not with a D, it's Cleveland. It ends in an N. So they showcased him, his debut. He had a couple home runs, but he just was a 4A player. I think at best, Tim Tebow is a double-A player at this point in time. You want to take a look at him? Sure. He's not going to make the Major League roster. And if he does, then you got a big problem. Because if a guy comes off the street, athletic talent and all, and just comes in and does it, I would be shocked. I would say you'd have success. He might even do some things magical, a home run or two.
He's got God on his side, man.
God will give him that first home run.
The Detroit Tigers will be God's team. And I think that would be the chip that put the Tigers over the top.
You know what God wants? A Fanatic U commercial break right now.
Okay, I guess.
Great
Tim Tebow and a Fanatic U commercial. But when we come back, we'll talk about the Lions. We're into training camp. We're really close to their first preseason game. That means absolutely nothing, but we'll be back. It's the Motor City Sports Rant on Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Doc here for FanaticU.com. Detroit Sports, official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. This week, Jarvie, guess what? Fanatic U is running a special on all hats. 20% off of all hats. If you go to any Fanatic U store, 6 locations all across Metro Detroit, you want a new hat, you want a new lid, go to Fanatic U. Any hat that you purchase, there's a sale running this week alone, 20% off. If you're a fan of all the Detroit teams, there's no better outfitter that you can check out than FanaticU.com. They're a great sponsor of ours. They have great customer service. Anything at all in regards to Detroit sports, merchandise that you need, go check out FanaticU.com. Support those who support us, and thank you to all our fine sponsors, and especially Fanatic U. Now back to Jarvie and the Doc on the Motor City Sports Rant, episode 72.
Welcome back to the Motor City Sports Rant. We got to talk about some Lions. We just talked a bunch about the Tigers. It's time to talk about my favorite team, the Detroit Lions. They're going to win the Super Bowl. I retract that immediately. They have a chance. Everybody has a chance. Every 32 teams. And if you dispute that, I will fight you.
The Lions in the Super Bowl. That would be awesome. Matthew Stafford would be the toast of the town. You would have Golden Tate being the mayor. You would have Eric Ebron basically being the Secretary of State. He'd be controlling everything. He's going to
give the finger to everybody, telling everybody to F off.
Man, so the news of the weekend regarding the Lions was Eric Ebron in a practice where the public was there. So in essence, the Lions were running a practice game. He gets carted off the field after performing greatly. He was able to catch the ball, lead drives, and he was looking good. And all the talk has been, roughly speaking, hey, we have the ability. Ebron can be a significant force. Doc and Jock did a hype video, hype audio for him. This is a guy that can be productive. Maybe not just be, a security blanket. Maybe be the feature guy. Because tight ends in this league are heavily prevalent right now, and successful offenses use the tight end.
Yep, Rob Gronkowski, Greg Olsen, Jordan Reed. List goes on. Jimmy Graham, Julius Thomas.
Maybe Eric Ebron, but he goes down, and all of a sudden you're like, oh no. But then, the reports came around that he was Snapchatting himself, all excited. He told his teammates he's going to be okay. It looks like it's going to be a bad ankle sprain. Word out of Allen Park is nothing, because they don't tell us nothing about nothing. So we're speculating, and we're looking at maybe just being a preseason injury, get back game 1, and handle your business. But I was very, very surprised in that I think I know where the Lion fan base is. We are fragile as thin glass in Detroit. We want to puff our chests out and say, yeah, we're the Lions. But what happens is when a guy like Ebron goes down, the thinking that the most Lions fans have is, oh, God, here we go again. And so the Lions fans are fragile, and I'm guilty of it too. When he went down, I'm like, oh, here we go again. I cannot believe it happened. The season's over. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? Maybe there's a chance the season could be better without Ebron. So I went back and forth, but in the end, it's probably going to be a situation where he's going to be back on the field. It's not going to be an Achilles injury, and he's going to likely be okay. And so why did the fans react that way?
That was my biggest worry, that it was an ACL tear.
If it was, what was the problem?
If it was because I think as we've talked about it on this podcast, that outside of Matt Stafford, Eric Ebron really is going to be key to this offense this season. If he can, it's his third year, can he finally step up and be productive, be what he was drafted to be, a pass-catching tight end? And I know people had high hopes with what they've seen in training camp so far. So I think that's what people saw, is that, and there's nobody behind us. Brandon Pettigrew is still coming off of his own ACL injury. We're talking about an undrafted guy like Cole Wick being our number one pass catching tight end. So there's got to be some concern in people. I'm really surprised that, or maybe I'm not that surprised, because I saw also, I think the same day, the Packers went out and they signed Kellen Winslow, who is a pass-catching tight end. I think he played maybe 2 years ago. I'm surprised that they didn't give him a chance or maybe reach out to him before the Packers, because the Packers, they already have tight ends. They have Jared Cook and, of course, the guy who caught the Hail Mary pass in Richard Rodgers. But then again, if you think about it, if they aren't as concerned about Ebron, then there really wasn't that need to go out and try and find a replacement. So, yeah, all indications are pointing to a bad ankle sprain, which that in itself does worry me a little bit, because ankles always seem to crop up again somewhere in the season. The ankle, that joint is such a fragile part of your leg.
Yeah, cuts and the moves that tight end's got to make is to get open, but again, blocking too. So it was not ideal for Eric Ebron to go down, in all seriousness, but there are options. Cole Wick has stepped up. There's free agent guys out there that you can go get. I don't believe that the season would have ended if Eric Ebron would have went down. He's an important part of that offense, and it looks like him and Stafford are, kind of hyping up this us against the world mentality. And Eric Ebron's got a chip on his shoulder. He's got a lot to prove. But there were a lot of mean fans out there that were like, good, he's a bust and things like that. So he's got
Vinny.
He's, Eric Ebron's got, he's a very polarizing figure. But it's better to have him. But we'll see.
And
what's realistic for him what are realistic stats for him this year?
Realistic stats for him this year, I probably put him anywhere between 50 and 70 receptions, probably 800 yards. And I think that's on the low side. If he can, he does have upside. He could be a pretty decent pass catching tight end, possibly get over 1,000 yards, get somewhere between 5 and 10 touchdowns. I think he had 5 touchdowns last year, so I think that's probably around what he's gonna get, because Marvin Jones is gonna eat up some of those catches and those red zone options. Golden Tate's gonna get more. But Ebron was going to factor more into this team this year with no Calvin Johnson. And I don't think it was going to be the end of the season, but the way that I've described it is that there's a lot of potential on this team. Eric Ebron is a part of that. For this team to get into the postseason and to possibly have success there, if Ebron was going to be out for the year, that is already one thing that you check off the list that we can't do.
Okay, so you see now what's going on with the Lions. You see the other storylines. Again, DeAndre Levy still we don't know what's going on with him. We're looking to see what's going on. But again, one thing that has been obvious to those that are watching practice, and it was addressed by Jim Bob Cooter, and they tried to do some damage control. So far in the preseason and practices and what we're seeing, the defensive line is just crushing the offensive line. He's come out and said, hey, we're going to be okay. We're going to be better. It's going to be an efficient offensive line. But from what people are seeing, it doesn't look that way. You concerned at all?
I'm not too concerned about what's going on in practice. The offensive line is going to be a work in progress. You have Taylor Decker, a rookie, playing left tackle, and then you have Riley Reif now playing a new position. It's going to be a work in progress, and I would say that our defensive line is pretty solid. You have Ziggy Ansah, Haloti Ngata, Tyron Walker, and then Devin Taylor. You have a pretty seasoned defensive line going up a offensive line that is still trying to figure it out. And hopefully they figure it all out and get all the kinks out by week 1. But I still think it's going to take a couple weeks of real games for that offensive line to really get going and to have real cohesion. So you may see some struggles in the beginning of the season, but I have full confidence in Jim Bob Cooter that they're going to get it worked out. And the offensive line isn't going to be the biggest problem for me. It's going to be, can they replace Calvin Johnson? Can Matt Stafford get the ball to those receivers? And even bigger, who's going to run the ball? Amir Abdullah, he's still wearing that red no-hit jersey. So is he going to be ready week 1? And can he stay healthy and be a productive main running back?
It is a little bit of a concern because, the Lions have question marks on defense, but they have talent as well. Ziggy Ansah is premier. It takes a little bit of time for an offensive line to gel, so we do have a little bit of time to watch and see how they evolve. Remember, training camp just started. It's a new offensive line, and one thing that you get a sense of when you talk about teams that have successful offensive lines is continuity. They play together for a long time. They get into a system that they're comfortable in that fits the talent. The scheme has to fit the talent, and sometimes the Lions have had problems in that they've run schemes that totally don't fit the offensive line talent. So, and you got to remember, Jim Bob Cooter overhauled the offense again. This isn't the same exact offense and verbiage that it was last year. He overhauled it. He advanced it. He's trying his best to get it to where he feels like it's going to be thriving. And so, of course, the offensive line is going to have time because you know how hard it is to, you have to react to the defense. You have to make the calls. You have to make the shifts. And then you have to react quickly to what Stafford's doing based upon what he's seeing. So it's easy from the outside to go, yeah, the offensive line is terrible right now and we're nervous. But you got to remember, it's not. It takes time. It takes time to gel.
And you look at the offensive, and I'm looking at the depth chart right now for the preseason game on Sunday against Pittsburgh. And all these guys are within their first 3 years, or essentially, at least 4 of them. You have Taylor Decker at left tackle. You have Laken Tomlinson at left guard. So already you got a first-year and a second-year player. You have Travis Swanson, who he's essentially a second-year player, playing his second season at center. Larry Warford at right guard, and then Riley Reif at right tackle. So you have all these guys who are either in their first couple years in the league, or in Riley Reif's case, is moving to a completely new position. So it's gonna take time, and I think another big thing with this core group is staying healthy and making sure that if they can stay healthy throughout the season, that's just going to be another plus that you can put on this team. Looking also at the depth chart, are you surprised at all that I'm looking on the defensive side, A'Shawn Robinson is pretty low on the depth chart right now. You have Haloti Ngata and Tyron Walker starting at D tackle, but then Gabe Wright, Karan Reed, Stephon Charles, Kyrie Thornton are all above A'Shawn Robinson right now. Is this something to be concerned about, or maybe it's just first preseason game, A'Shawn Robinson needs to work his way up because he is the rookie? Or is this kind of a sign that maybe he isn't doing as good as we hoped he was going to be? Because I know immediately, I think after off-season workouts, it was being talked about that A'Shawn Robinson could be the backup guy, or maybe even beat out a Tyron Walker to be the starting tackle. I'm
not concerned because you got to remember, look at it like this. Not too many times do rookies just come in and have significant impact on the offensive and defensive line. Yes, they have. They have in the past, but it takes time. You got to remember that the Lions are in a tough situation and that there's a lot of pressure to win now, as opposed to, they do also realize that they have to have some level of patience, but they have to win games. And so if A'Shawn Robinson doesn't come out there right away and do the job, then we say he's a bust. But what you'd say is give him some time, give him at least half the season of learning a system, being acclimated to being a professional. You got to remember, I understand that we are a here and now society. We drafted him now. We're paying him now. He should go out there now and produce. But you got to remember, too, he's also going up against guys that are bigger, stronger, faster, and with more experience. So when you have that, that's the reason why you bring guys along that are young and expose them to veterans, is so that he can learn and reach his potential. I see potential in Ashawn Robinson. It's just it's going to take time to develop. And you got to remember, I don't believe Terrell Austin's system is like, okay, very easy to walk in and perform. It's one of those systems where you got to be very aware of what you're doing, and you got to learn. And so right now, if he has to take a secondary role and he's lower on the depth chart, you just hope that he uses it as motivation to get himself back on the field, and that's what you're hoping for.
And I have to agree. I think it's the first preseason game, and I think if anything, it actually gives him more time to play. If he is at the bottom of that depth chart right now, that means that you're probably going to see him maybe even 2 full quarters in the third and fourth quarter, depending on when they take out their starters. So that may be a good sign. But yeah, and as we've seen with this defensive line, it's all about rotation. Everybody pretty much plays every single week. Haloti Ngata, Tyron Walker, and who's to say if they can stay healthy for the entire season. So I'm not worried about Robinson yet. I haven't really seen any articles saying that he's been a problem in camp. If anything, I've seen positive stuff coming out about him. But I am excited about this preseason game. How much are you actually going to watch?
It's Friday. I think the 12th is when's the first game?
Yes, the 12th, which would put us at Friday.
I probably watch most of it. Maybe intently the first half. And then, maybe do other things, tweet or pay attention to other stuff in the second half, but just pay attention to storylines. But the first preseason game, the starters go 3-4 series, maybe not even that. So I just want to make sure that no one gets hurt. I want to see how Stafford looks that first drive. I want to see, how the offensive line looks, how Decker looks. Other than that, hopefully Darius Slay walks away injury-free.
I think that's the biggest thing for everybody is to
walk away injury-free.
Make sure that none of your guys are getting injured. And the Hall of Fame game was supposed to be on Sunday, and
disaster.
How weird was that they just canceled the game completely? Mm-hmm. I mean,
it's not weird. Once the mistake was made by, the paint that was put on the field and the way it coagulated and the way it made the field harder, once it was addressed that player safety was concerned, that it was basically the field was hard as concrete, you have to do it. The problem is, though, how in this day and age, with staffs and people directing people, does that happen? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And I can't believe they just completely canceled it, and that they didn't find this out until they were literally up until people were in the stands and waiting there for the game to happen. And then they just call it off. Why didn't they just move it to the next day? Maybe move it somewhere else. We're in a day and age where there's an abundance of football stadiums. Why couldn't they just play it somewhere else?
Yeah, that's true. But see, the problem with the decision was made that fast, so maybe wait a couple of days. The problem is travel plans, tickets. You can't accommodate that many people, and so what you got to do is when you make a mistake, you got to have scenarios where you correct it relatively fast. You can't. The people that came there, they can't stay an extra day or their travel plans. You can do it logistically, but in terms of appeasing your customers, you can't do it. It's a disaster all around in terms of, now you got people saying, hey, pay for my travel, pay for this. You pissed off a lot of people. And it's like you basically have the headliner and there's no headline. It's a disastrous thing, one that can never happen. And you got to start paying attention. The NFL, slowly but surely, is making faux pas after faux pas after faux pas. And while in and of itself it's not going to kill the league, but you continue to upset the fans, you continue to run the league this way, you are going to have situations where the fans are going to become more and more upset and unruly and disappointed, and you're going to start seeing some financial problems.
I guess it's not that big of a deal because it's only preseason football, but I was really excited at least to watch some sort of football on Sunday night, and we got robbed. But you got anything else, John?
I had a great week, man, and I'm looking forward to this week ahead in sports. The Lions are back. We got to talk now Michigan State. We haven't even delved into that yet. It's looking good. D'Antonio is going to have to continue to hear the name Harbaugh and deal with it. Next week or so, I do believe we're going to talk a lot of college football. Big name guests are going to be showing up here on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network, so stay tuned. I'm looking forward to that. So football's around the corner. It's getting closer, and I'm super excited, man. Let's just thank you for everyone that's been listening and downloading our podcast. It makes it fun to wrap sports when you have an audience that we can engage with, and all the shows here, basically running shows daily on the DSP Network. Greatly appreciated.
That will do it for this episode of the Motor City Sports Rant. I am Jason Jarvie. Follow me on Twitter at Jarvie the King. He is John Macaroon. Follow the network on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. Until next week, we will see you later.
Okay, nice idiot. You. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.